To order. It's 7:30. Today is the 19th, I think? 18th. 18th. Woodbridge Wetlands Commission. First order of business. Joseph Solodo, 11 Clark Road. Let's see, we'll seat Josh for Bob, and that's about it.
That's all we have to do.
That's all we have to do.
Act.
Okay, so, application to dredge pond. Come up, sign in, and explain what you're gonna be doing and how it's gonna be done.
The pond is a very small one. Since it was made by damming up a stream, it silts up, of course. It was dredged 14 years ago, and now it's almost completely silted up. You can
Okay.
practically walk across it. What I propose to do is scoop out the muck, throw it on the far side, and, well, no more than that, except perhaps to put some sort of mild barrier to make absolutely sure that the muck doesn't flow back into the stream.
So it's gonna get spread, or?
Yeah.
And it's gonna be emptied by, I would imagine dredged by machine?
Yes, of course. Mm-hmm.
And is this the same that you did before in terms of the placement of the dredgings?
The end result is the same. The method is and is not what was done before. I dredged the pond soon after I moved in, at a time when there was no inland wetlands agency. I did then what I just described to you, and the muck is still sitting there. It's got plants and shrubs growing on it. 14 years ago, the second time during my tenancy that it needed to be dredged, I was required to do something much more elaborate. The muck was scooped out, dumped on the near side of the stream. Then I had to wait for it to be dewatered, and then it was trucked away. To do that will cost twice as much, and so far as I can see, it makes no difference whatsoever except the cost. Nothing harmed the stream. There's no other wetland involved, and I think it would be a very poor idea if, because the larger job is so much more expensive, the pond just silts up and never becomes useful again.
I suspect
Okay.
we should probably take
Have
a look.
a site visit.
Site visit, yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and so we would schedule that. Our next meeting is on the 16th, and I would propose that we do the site visit, because it's gonna be too dark by the 16th to go before the meeting, I think.
Right, I think you're
Yes.
So how about the Saturday before, which is the 12th in the morning?
We can pick it and then make sure, let's see if we can do it. I mean, sure.
Yeah,
Let's plan
so-
it.
let's plan on the site visit on the 12th,
Okay.
and,
I need to check my schedule. I think it's okay, but
okay.
Yeah,
with whom should I coordinate? What's the
Uh,
best way of doing this?
It would
probably
be
Chris,
Through
through
Chris?
Chris. Yeah.
Good.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll send her a note to do it on the 12th, and if that doesn't work, we can do it the Saturday before,
Very good,
because that would still get us,
very good.
would be okay.
Yeah.
And we'll do it, morning, 8 o'clock, whatever
That's good for
we
me.
wanna do. 8 o'clock, okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay. We'll pass it on.
Now that we're all here together, though, is there anything else I can tell you?
how much material do you think is gonna come out of there?
I don't know.
Well, how deep do you expect it to be when you're done?
Last time it was dug 8 feet deep in the middle. Of course, it slopes up to the sides. And with no more excavation than that, it's
How-
lasted 14 years.
And what's the diameter, roughly?
We know it's 820 square feet, you said.
Okay,
Oh.
I calculated it
Oh,
in the
820
past,
square
yes.
feet, okay.
Is there an outlet coming out of the pond
Yeah.
itself, or is it just an inlet? Oh, I haven't seen it.
It's on the
Yeah,
back
there's
of
both
it.
an inlet, yes, you have to look at the last sheet
Yeah.
for the diagram.
There's a red X on here, what is the significance of that, if any?
That's where I propose to dump the muck.
Okay, so it's gonna be in a pile, you're not gonna spread it, or you're gonna spread it
Well, it'll
as-
spread somewhat, yes, of course. I'll spread it as wide as necessary. That doesn't, it's land that I don't care about. It's just got garbagey plants growing there. In fact, they're growing there on the muck from the first excavation. Is that clear to you?
I think
Yeah,
we should look at it.
Yeah.
Yes, of
I think
course.
we probably need to make sure that none of the muck you pull out goes back in the stream, as you said.
Right.
As you said.
is the land flat there, or is it, pretty much, or is it slope?
It slopes backwards away from the stream. I mean, of course, there's a bank, but behind it, where the X is, the land slopes the other way,
So you're filling
away
in-
from.
You're raising the grade locally. But we'll look at it.
yes.
It doesn't really matter,
Yeah.
but we'll look at it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, anything else? So we'll plan on
Okay.
seeing you at 8 o'clock on
12th.
the 12th.
Very good.
Very good,
Thank you.
thank you.
It should have been in, something, oh, wait a minute, I don't know. It was in the pile here. You can have that file too. That's that file right there.
This one,
Next item of business,
It looks like this.
probably in my,
the estate of Margaret Taffel, 106 Seymour Road. Jean Paul, an update.
If you remember, the last time we met, Josh had an issue with possibility of, no, he had a legitimate concern, so,
We're both Josh.
well, Josh as opposed to Joshua, how's that?
Okay.
Or-
I don't know.
Mr. Lemon as opposed to Mr. Goldberg, had an issue with a possibility of maybe the wetlands had been misflagged in the, central area and asked that we have it re-looked at. So we sent William Kenny and Associates back out there. I sent a, copy of the report back, and his comment was he stands by his original flagging. The area of concern that Mr. Lemon had, was not a wetland. It appeared to be disturbed soil and such, but, he said he stood by the flagging as, delineated on the plans.
Okay.
And you have a copy of that report. That's been, I submitted that, the week after the meeting.
Good.
does anybody have anything to say?
I didn't have any issue, I don't
Okay,
remember.
alright.
So, what's the plan?
Well, the plan is,
So far.
it appears that we've, to recap what this particular operation is, the Taffels approached me, and I said it's a very difficult piece. You have two ponds on it, there's a central wetland. I don't recommend spending $10,000 to put together an application only to have it go down in flames. I said, what I'd like to do, because it is so, so sensitive, so to speak, I'd like to have the commission look at it and at least give it some thought and say, this doesn't look undoable, or this doesn't look impossible, depending on what you come back with. I mean, you can't judge what you don't have in front of you.
Correct.
But you can say that, you know, we've done exactly what I was hoping you would do, you know, called flushing the game, is you had a series of concerns. Terry raised a number of points about if you're gonna have a generator pad, if you're gonna have this, if you're gonna have that, you're gonna have, you know, a number of things. A separation to the buffer, because so much of the lot is in the upland review area. and some of it is gonna start to encroach on a buffer.
Correct.
Mr. Lemon had a concern about the accuracy of the wetlands flagging, so we had it done twice. We've crossed all those i's and t's, and I think what we have left now is a reasonable shot at getting a building lot, which is what it's been worked at. There's nobody on the commission has said, I think this is absolutely horrible, I think this is absolutely undoable. But again, I wasn't asking you to prejudge it, I was asking you just to take a look to see if, you know, this is something that would be considered. We still have to make the approval process. We still have to dig test holes, and one of the reasons I want to do this is because I've got to go out there and dig test holes, and that may or may not kill the lot. I mean, you know, there's a number of slips. I don't want to spend my client's money
Understand.
unnecessarily.
Understand.
My philosophy is spend it slowly until you get to the point where you no longer have an option. And we still have wetlands soils testing to do. But once the soils testing is done, if everything looks reasonable, and I can put a modest size or a reasonable sized house on there within a working area, as I told Sarah, then you roll the dice. I mean, you may still get a no, don't get me wrong.
Understand.
You know, once you see an application in front of you, you may still decide to vote no for whatever reason. But I don't want to go that route unless I have a reasonable assurance that it's doable. And based upon what I've seen so far, I think I've got a shot at this. But unless somebody sees something, you know, I think I've crossed every T and crossed every I and dotted every T, crossed every T and dotted every I that you've asked for.
So the next step,
Soils testing
would
and then an application. And then if that pans out, an application, a full-blown
the
application.
soil testing for the septic.
Septic system,
For the
yeah.
septic.
If that pans out, we have sufficient area for
Is there any question about a well there?
No, the wells, this part of Connecticut, they're mostly hard rock wells.
Yeah.
So normally you're in 35 to 50 feet of overburden, and then you're into the ledge. And usually, with few exceptions, wells are probably one of the last things you worry about.
Okay, more so in the placement of it as opposed to
The
finding
placement,
water.
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, is I still have, I've got room, and I did a schematic that showed the placement of a well. It may not be there when we're done, but it seems reasonable. It doesn't seem unreasonable. And one of the things I'm probably gonna propose for this one is probably a hard and fast, demarcation of the buffer. We did that on Grouse Lane in a couple of spots where we actually put 2 rail fences up. And in looking at this, I'm probably gonna recommend something like that. I'm not gonna recommend a stone wall.
No. Any,
Well, that's why I was asking if you guys had any, I mean, I raised concerns last time, I was just seeing if anybody else had
Yeah.
anything. I mean, I have some things
I
to say.
think your
that-
observation of our questions is accurate.
I'm just tend to be conservative on the tough ones. I mean, I may not seem that way sometimes, but like I tell my client, if I can't walk into a commission meeting with a 90-10 percentage of getting an approval, then you might as well take your money up to Foxwoods and have a good time.
Well-
It's more fun than getting beat up in here.
it seems reasonable to me to proceed with the,
Well, let me make some comments because.
Sure.
Because I think that I was concerned with the flagging, obviously,
Yep.
but that wasn't necessarily my only concern. I mean, that was
understand
the top concern. We can all agree that the disturbance is gonna be within the regulated area, correct? Whether it's upland review buffer, whether or not it's actually in the wetland itself is kind of,
We're gonna have to review whatever is built, because there'll be more details that we don't have now.
right, well, what I'm saying,
Right.
the
It
disturbance
won't be
is-
in the wetland. There will be no disturbance in the wetland. There
No,
will-
but it's within the
There will
buffer.
be a disturbance in the upland review area.
Right.
And for better or for worse, there may be disturbance closer than we like. You know, normally we try to keep 50 to 75 feet. I would rather not if I can avoid it. But again, that would be part of an application, and at that point, you would have to judge it.
Exactly.
Like I said, the wetland line was a concern. Do I think it's necessary to send another soil scientist out there? No, I think that would be more of a school project more than a regulatory project, an academic exercise over a regulatory exercise. I wish I had seen this blurb from your soil scientist when it first came through. For whatever reason, I missed it. I was busy. But as I read it today to prepare for the meeting, there's two sentences right in the middle that I find contradictory unless there's some further clarification, because it says, although there are skunk cabbage plants growing in the area, I find the soils in the area are not wetland soils. They are not poorly or very poorly drained, and they have not formed from alluvial deposit.
I don't find that contradictory at all.
Well, how are you defining poorly drained, very poorly drained? Because that's a very specific definition.
That's the definition of a wetland.
Well, I
And he
think.
says he doesn't find it.
Okay, well, I that may be the case, but I'd have no supporting documentation to verify that as a statement, because if I had soil logs to say, because a very poorly drained soil would be upland soil all the way down to 18 inches. My concern is that the skunk cabbage plants, every plant has what's called a wetland indicator status, which is basically a designation indicating how prevalent a plant is to grow in a wetland or an upland environment. Skunk cabbage is known as an obligate. Now, an obligate is been statistically derived to grow in a wetland 99% of the time. There is that 1% chance that a skunk cabbage plant will grow in some local microclimate where there's some perch, there's a rock. You can have a skunk cabbage plant growing outside of a wetland, but it's that 1 in 100% chance. So when an obligate would only grow in a poorly drained soil. So when somebody's saying that, although I saw a lot of skunk cabbage out there.
I know, I don't disagree with you,
Right.
which is why I sent the guy back. I was worried.
That's one concern, is definitely that there was a lot of skunk cabbage out there. It's an obligate. It grows in a wetland 99% of the time, but somebody's saying that all that skunk cabbage happens to be growing outside of a wetland. It could very well be the case. If I had soil logs to see it, I'd say, oh, okay.
I don't know if soil scientists, the way we practice wetlands delineation in this country, or excuse me, I apologize. The way we practice wetlands delineation in this state, we do not keep logs of the soils that come out of the hole. All they're looking for is 18 to 24 inches of defined soil. No one other than the only time we keep soil logs are when we do test pits and deep test pits for drainage structures, for detention basins, or for septic systems. That's the only time we keep soil logs.
Right.
We've never I've been doing this since the 70s. I have never had a soil log other than what they provide as soil types. We've never said, okay, I've got 0 to 3 inches of topsoil, 3 inches to 18 inches of a model brown fine silty sand. We don't do that for wetlands delineation. We just don't. All we do is provide a soil type.
But the soil type is determined.
Ridgeberry, fine sandy loam, stone.
But that's where are you coming from, the USDA maps, or because that
He has it on there. They were included. They were included in the original. The soil types were all included in the original flagging, which was part of the original not applications. It's not an application. It's part of the original documentation. He had soil types.
So we have it in the folders.
We have it in the folder,
okay.
So you probably have to go look at it.
Well,
and that's why. And I think I sent a copy of the email that I sent to him with that, which said specifically that I had a number of commission members who were concerned about a certain area, and I pointed them right at the area where you wanted it looked at, and that's what came back. So I got to take the guy. He knows more about it than I do.
I don't disagree with that. But when somebody's telling me that there's a poorly drained soil.
Well, he's saying there's not a poorly drained soil. That's not what it says.
Or not a poorly drained
Yeah.
soil. There has to be some sort of data to support that statement. You can't just make up. it's
He
poorly
probably went
drained.
out there and drilled some holes. He went out there with an auger, with a 2-inch auger, and drilled holes like a soil scientist normally does.
No, you dig a profile down to 24 inches, normally with a
These
shovel.
in most of the soil scientists I work with, they auger usually 24 inches. They don't dig. They'll dig holes on occasion, but most of them will use an auger
Well, how do you know exactly where the soil's coming from when you're going
because
down?
they're using a 24-inch auger and they pull out the profile, they pop it on the ground, and usually you can see them lie next to the hole. Sometimes we call it the mad woodcock.
Okay.
That's how they determine it, and that's why I said this is the way it's been done. With few exception, the only time I've actually ever done profiles was for some detention basins which were adjacent to a wetland, and we were concerned about cross-contamination. And there we did actual profiles where we took backhoe in, dug them, and scraped
I'm
them.
not talking back.
But I'm saying,
when you go out, because I have maybe 250 wetland delineations under my belt, never had a backhoe, never used the soil auger.
See,
What I did is use a sharpshooter shovel, dug a profile, took a measuring tape out and measured, and described the soils, what I saw. So did I see a plow layer? Did I see a B layer? Did I see a C layer? Where did I see modeling? Modeling determines whether or not it's a poorly drained soil because modeling is an indication of the seasonal high water table rising.
sometimes,
Almost all the time.
not in a sandy soil, and not in a soil with a high iron content.
Well, we weren't in a sandy soil.
I understand, but what I'm saying is, all I'm
Right.
saying is, the way it's normally done, the way Bill Kenny, and I'm 90% sure that's the way, he actually describes his methodology, it should be in the first page. That's the way Ken Stevens used to do it. They usually use a 2-inch auger, and they pull a profile, and they measure the profile.
Well, what if you hit rock at 6 inches? What if you
Then he
hit
moves over.
But you're in space and time. You're delineating a space. So if you move over, you're collecting data to support a line in space, right? Is all I'm saying is that if there's data to support it, I'd be. But
You've got all the data I have. I
Okay.
apologize, but you got all the data I have.
so that's my concern. The other concern, I guess, is that it's a severely sloped site. It's
I would
it's a heavily wooded site.
And again, I would argue both those points. It was a cleared site that's reverting, and the trees aren't that great. I mean, those are brash trees. There's a couple of relatively large trees, and some of those are dying.
Right.
But that was a relatively cleared site up until about 30 or 40 years ago.
Well, yeah, it was probably some sort of farm field beforehand, or
There
some
was,
sort
there
of
was a horse
grazing
barn there.
field. Yeah.
The person next door said there used to be a horse barn right there.
But it's wooded. It's a wooded site. It's on
Yeah.
a slope. There's a high water table.
Yeah.
It's directly adjacent to a larger wetland site across the street.
Well, you've got two on the site, and then you've got the one across the
Well, you have
street.
2 ponds on the site and some wetlands on the site. So, I could, I don't want to beat a horse to death or anything, but the disturbance is definitely going to be within the buffer area or the adjacent area, the peripheral area to the wetland. On a site like that, in my opinion, I hope people are willing to disagree or have different opinions, and we could all disagree and have, But if I were to not raise my concerns, I don't even know what I would be, why I'd be sitting in this chair right now. So we've given out. I've been here 2.5 years now. We've given out dozens of permits. Many of them are just no-brainer, mundane permits, septics.
I wouldn't consider this one a no-brainer.
on grassy areas where they've already been, the vegetation's been removed. The disturbance is going to be minimal, relatively, compared to a site like this, which is heavily wooded. Whether or not the trees are worth anything, they serve a function. They have values for the wildlife. They also, they've been there for 30, 40 years. Who knows exactly how long they've been there. It's not really important. But the disturbance is going to be within the regulated area. We can all agree on that one, right? So then it's a matter of whether we say the disturbance is minimal And we should grant the permit because in the end, it's just minimal disturbance. And we've done that dozens of times already. And I can only think of maybe a handful of permits that we didn't grant. On this site, I just have to say that in my opinion, and like I said, everybody should voice their own concerns. If you think that this is just a normal wetland permit, then that's fine with me. But I see this as maybe an exceptional site as far as from a regulatory standpoint.
I see it as a challenge site. I don't see it as exceptional or not exceptional. You know, I work on hundreds of sites like this.
Right.
I don't see it as I see it as a site that's gonna require some
detailed
care.
plan. Maybe to move this along, it seems reasonable to me that you go ahead with the testing,
Okay.
and the plan that you put together for us is gonna have to have more detail
Oh,
than,
yeah.
than a usual plan, because all of these questions are gonna come up again, and we're gonna
Exactly.
review it again.
And that was the purpose of doing this, is because I've got great feedback.
And at that point in time, we'll again assess the impact, as you've been talking about,
Correct.
on the wetlands.
Yeah.
And we'll see again what the questionable area looks like. When do you anticipate?
Soils testing probably in 2 to 3 weeks. Application probably September, October, maybe for the October meeting, maybe for the November meeting,
Yeah,
but no later. It depends on what Sarah says.
right. I would just only be concerned about having to review it in the middle of winter when it's snow covered. I
It'll
think.
probably happen till
There,
December.
there's
So-
really no, unless there's deep snow. The woods, especially woods with trees on them and a good leaf cover, they don't freeze, and they're usually pretty easy to
Well, that piece of
walk.
land's not necessarily easy to
Oh no, I
to get
understand.
into.
I understand. Well, it'll be easier once the leaves come down. But like I said, it all depends on what we find when we do the deep test pits, and it all depends on what my client wants to do. My client might pull the plug on this. You may not see me again
On this subject.
on this.
on this subject.
on
Yeah,
this
I've got one coming in 2 months, which
Well, from an engineering standpoint, I mean, does that, are you gonna, are you gonna start to spend the client's money and then risk a little bit more of, there's not gonna be,
the next time you see me will be a full-blown application
Right.
with all the details that you need. There's going to be on-site detention or on-site treatment. There's going to be the septic system design. There's going to be everything you need to make a decision. All the soil erosion sediment controls, everything, soup to nuts. As Jack said, it has to be a complete application.
Right.
And with the,
All the details.
I'd like to see the soils described, or if the scientist went out there and he actually looked at the soils, and he
should
should,
be
he
in
I'll
should
call
have, he
Jack.
should have some soil descriptions.
I'll call Bill Kenny and find out if he's got a log. Be more than
And,
happy
and
to.
if he could maybe clarify his statement of
Sure.
exactly the prevalence, the high occurrence of skunk cabbage
It is confusing.
with,
I will ask him.
with the fact that there's not poorly drained soils. It's like almost saying the sky is blue, but it's really orange. Which one is it? It could be orange, it could be blue, but I'd like to see exactly, because those are
I will
contradictory.
voice my I will voice
Yeah.
your concerns to Bill Kenny, and we'll see what comes back.
Okay,
It's the right thing to
fair
do.
enough.
Okay, I think my questions have been answered, and I think I've got my marching orders, and I thank you for your time. I apologize, it's been a long process. But thank you very, very much.
That's what we're here for.
What's that?
That's what we're here for.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you very, very much, and have a pleasant evening.
You too.
Enjoy your retirement. Tell Sean I said hello.
are you here for,
Do I,
okay.
do I, from
Oh.
the Board of Selectmen?
Oh, okay, great. Nothing on goals, changes, directions. I guess the next thing would be the minutes. Any comments on the minutes from June 19th? I didn't see anything. Anybody else have anything?
They didn't find anything.
Did he do that project, the Boy Scout? Did he have enough time, I wonder?
Don't know.
Don't know.
We asked him to come back when he completed with some pictures, because
Oh, okay.
it sounded like an interesting project,
Yeah.
so.
I
So
guess
hopefully
he's
he'll
not- yeah,
show up
okay.
one of these days.
Seemed like a nice kid.
Hopefully, he got started and got finished, and it went well.
I just don't see anything in June 19th at all.
Okay, we have a motion to approve.
I will make that motion.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Hey, where's it at?
Next would be the minutes from July 3rd special meeting.
Oh, that was the one, yeah, that was the Boy Scout one, right? Yeah.
And I didn't see anything of those.
Usually I can find a typo.
Yeah, these are good.
Okay, a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion.
Okay,
I'll second this one.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's passed, approved. Okay, let's see.
Okay, is there anything else?
Terry's not here. We have some correspondence from Bethany, but again, it's just, as far as I can tell, it's just documentation. We don't need to take any action on that. And so I believe that is it, unless somebody has something else. So a motion to adjourn.
I won't.
You're going
Josh, no, you get on the scorecard here.
Need a second? You gonna second?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
We're out.